here at the offices of Schindler's Attorneys. I'm with partner Chantal Gladwin, and we're talking about antenuptial contracts.
An ANC stands for antenuptial contract. It's an agreement that spouses enter into before they get married, and it's very important that they sign it before their actual date of marriage, otherwise it doesn't mean anything unless you have an order of court authorising it. So basically the reason that you would sign an ANC is to exclude a concept in our law called community of property. So community of property is the idea that when you get married, absolutely everything that belongs to you belongs to your spouse as well, and vice versa. And this applies both to assets and liabilities. So you would want to sign an ANC in order to protect yourself, and also in order for your spouse to protect him or herself from you in the event that something happened and you became insolvent, or you just had a lot of debt and your creditors were calling that debt out.
And what could happen if you don't have an ANC? So you're in a position where you haven't signed an ANC and you've got married, and what position are we in then?
Well, then you're married in community of property, and that's a dangerous position to be in, precisely because it means that your spouse then basically owns everything that you own and is liable for all of your debts, and that you are liable for all of their debts. So if it just so happened that your spouse is a budding entrepreneur and has a brilliant business, but the business tanks in a couple of years and your spouse goes insolvent, you too then go insolvent because you are not regarded as separate from your spouse. So, in terms of international law, and this international law applies in South Africa as it does in almost every other country in the world, the country that the husband resides in at the date of the marriage will be the law of the country that will apply to the marriage. So it's quite a mouthful, but basically what it means is if you and I are going to get married and you were living in South Africa and I was living in France, it doesn't matter where in the world we get married, whether it's Iceland or Paris or Vegas, it doesn't matter, because you were living in South Africa at the date of the marriage. That means that our marriage will forever after be governed by South African law. And that's why it's really important for spouses in South Africa to understand that even if you get married in the UK or while you're on holiday in Vegas, you are always going to be bound by South African law. And in terms of South African law, if you do not have an antenuptial contract signed before you get married, you will be married in community of property.
Tell us about the options with an ANC. You've got an accrual, with accrual and without an accrual. Just tell us a bit about that.
Okay, so your standard ANC comes in with two types. So the one is, we call it with accrual, the other one we call straight or without accrual. So let me just explain a little bit about what accrual is. So back in the day in South Africa, many women didn't work. And ultimately what happened was that although they would spend their entire lives dedicated to their husband and their children, their estate, the amount of money that they were worth, wouldn't really grow over that time. In the awful, awful situation where after 20 years of marriage and dedication to her husband, a wife got divorced, she would basically be left with nothing, notwithstanding that she'd given up most of her good working life to that man. So the idea of accrual was brought into our law. So accrual is the idea that both parties share equally in the growth that occurs during marriage. So it does not mean that you get equal amounts of money. As we were talking about community of property earlier, where you and your spouse are both regarded as owning everything equally, it's not that, it's quite different. So let's take a practical example. Let's say that you and I got married again. Let's say that we are both worth absolutely nothing at the date of marriage. You have a budding career as a TV presenter, and I say I'm worth half my kids. Let's say that when you get divorced 10 years later, you're worth 10 million rand, and I'm worth nothing. The growth on your estate, which is the important part of this, is 10 million rand. My growth is absolutely nothing. In that situation, you would give me half of the growth. You would give me 5 million rand of divorce, and that would be so that we both end up sharing the growth that happened during the marriage. And this is because although I didn't go to work and earn the money, I had to look after the children, look after the house, make the food, wash the clothes, do everything else that enabled you to earn. So if you're going to get married with accrual, then you have a couple of other options. So accrual is your sort of first staple in your antenuptial, and then you might want to exclude some items from accrual. So for example, let's say that we are both going to get married and we both own houses, for example. We might want to exclude those houses from the accrual calculations, because although we want to share in the growth of the marriage going forward together, because we'll be working towards a joint estate together, We don't want to be sharing the benefits of the assets that we have already earned and accumulated in our lives before the marriage, because your spouse wasn't part of creating that asset. So you can exclude items. Get an antenuptial agreement and make sure that it's signed before the marriage. And this applies even if you get married overseas, and very importantly, this applies even if you are going to get married in terms of customary law. The same laws apply. You must have an antenuptial agreement before your customary wedding, or else you will be married in community of property.
Okay, that was Chantal Gladwin, partner at Schindler's. We're at the Schindler's offices. Very important message, go out and get your ANC. It is vitally important.